Now, game week 17 might have only just started, but with the busy fixtures coming thick and fast over the festive period, it's worth getting ahead and obviously looking at the players we need to be buying and selling ahead of game week 18. Now, before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as we are trying to hit 11,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and it is only possible with your guys' amazing support. As always, with these transfer targets videos, of course, I like to take a look at the next game week, obviously being game week 18, and as we can see here from the Fantasy Hub projections for goals and clean sheet percentages, there are some really tasty games next game week, not only from an attacking standpoint but also from a defensive standpoint as well. Liverpool versus Leicester, Arsenal versus Ipswich, Chelsea Fulham looks like an interesting one as well. Manchester United Wolves could also be a really tasty tie, and of course City in the early kickoff as well after today's V, whether or not they can bounce back as well. So some really appetizing, Boxing Day and post Boxing Day kind of clashes over this festive period as well. Captaincy is going to be a big one for that one, and of course we are going to be looking at potentially bringing in some players for some of these games as well, but it looks like it could be a very entertaining day, to be honest. Lots of goals could be flying in over the kind of Christmas period as well, with really high projected numbers as well. Some decent clean sheet odds for the big teams as well, with Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and you'd argue Manchester United as well, all having very favourable fixtures. And obviously Crystal Palace with their first game against Bournemouth, as we'll see with the 11ify data, starting to go on this really good long run of fixtures, and definitely a team we need to be looking at going a little bit further. Obviously we'll talk about captain in future videos as well, because I think it is going to be such a tight call, with some great fixtures for Arsenal, great fixtures for Liverpool, and of course the great fixture for Chelsea as well. And let's not even forget Erling Haaland. Let's not rule him out. I know he's not been delivering at the same level, but it is still one of those bottom half sides in Everton. But I think it probably is going to be between Saka, Salah and Palmer for me for captain. Let's move on then, like I said, to that 11ify data. Starting off first with clean sheet data over the next 5 game weeks. As you can see, Arsenal really fancied 60% in match day 18. So, if you do have a Raya, a Saliba, a Gabriel, definitely need to be playing them. And maybe, I think Ross put a tweet out, FPL Raptor, saying that if you didn't have 2+ Arsenal defenders, pretty much a clean sheet is worthless at this point. It's probably going to be equating to around 115% effective ownership if you just have the one. So I think a lot of people are probably maybe going to be looking at that double up in terms of Arsenal defence as well. We can see a consistent kind of level of +40s in terms of those clean sheet percentages, so definitely worth some sort of investment there. I think City's probably will drop when the 11ify model does update again. I know them data isn't just based off one season, it's based off historical data, and obviously if we're going off that, City have been one of the best teams in Europe for the probably past 5-6 seasons, so it's always going to look kind of strong, and that's why it might look a little bit of an anomaly. But I do expect, as the season does progress, and if City still look pretty woeful, those numbers will start to diminish, and probably not a team I would be looking at investing in for me personally right at this moment. They just don't look at the races, even with good fixtures coming up. It doesn't look the same City side. Pep looks completely frustrated and potentially out of ideas as well. There was also an announcement pre-game that they aren't going to be signing, I believe, the guy from Real Sociedad or Bruno Guimaraes in the window, which is for me 2 vital players that they could have done with if they were to rebuild the remainder of this season. That midfield area is massively lacking. Defensively as well, they look all over the shop. Liverpool as well, also pretty worthwhile. Chelsea as well, I feel, fall into that bracket. They're again about to go on this extremely long run of amazing fixtures. Fulham, another team that I think, a lot of people bought into this week. Obviously the matchday 18 fixture not the best, but still decent numbers going forward, and they've been a pretty good side as well for projected goals as well. So Robinson, Castagna, who's become a popular asset with Tete out for 6 to 8 weeks as well, Anderson at 4.2 million as well, could all be really good budget value pickups if you are stretched for budget or trying to cram another premium in, or maybe some of the more expensive forwards in Isak and of course Jackson as well. Nottingham Forest, another clean sheet for them, again proving why they've been one of the best defences in the league this season. Again, really strong projected numbers over the next few weeks as well. So Aina's probably going to be the top pick, another 15-pointer. That's his second of the season. But I think any investment into that Forest defence is probably going to be quite good for this season. Regardless of the fixtures, they're still looking like a really reassured defence, and that is showing not only with the data but the projected data going forward as well. Palace, like I spoke about, they're about to go on this really decent run. As we can see here, some really great statistics for clean sheet percentages going forward. So Daniel Munoz is going to be my favourite player if you are obviously looking for one, but maybe if you are on a wild card or looking for a goalkeeper, I think Dean Henderson could be a very steady, safe pair of hands to obviously go for. As we're seeing, we're starting to see a drop off with West Ham, Brighton and Brentford as well. Also in that bracket does fall Wolves as well, with all their fixtures taking a little bit more of a sharp turn over the next few weeks. So again, probably worth shifting out some of their assets and starting to move to kind of teams towards the top. And obviously if you've got budget assets from those ones, you're probably looking at people like a Levi Colwell, a Robinson, a Anderson, a Castagna, an Aina, people like that, Daniel Munoz, they're probably going to be where you're looking at in terms of your transfers going forward from a defensive standpoint. Let's move on then. Let's take a look at the projected attacking data from 11FI over the next 5 game weeks as well. And again, we are seeing, you know, Manchester City still kind of towards the top end, and there's some really good fixtures coming up for Manchester City. We'll talk about it a little bit later with Erling Haaland and the fixtures, but they are really good, and good fixtures do breed form. And I think, you know, City can't keep losing games. It's just not plausible for a team with that much quality in to be continually losing games. But it's kind of the way it's going a little bit. Maybe these projected numbers do need a little bit of skewing, but you know, this was kind of an area where initially a few weeks ago I was looking at potentially bringing Haaland back in around this period because of the good fixtures, because of the good projected goals. But now the form that City have continued to show, I don't think that's going to be the plan for me going forward. Liverpool top 4 projected goals for match day 18, so obviously I do feel that gives the largest swing towards Mohamed Salah as the best captaincy option for that game week as well. Obviously I probably would have said if they didn't have the double game week, this could have been another kind of triple captain use period, but they do now have that double game week, so if you do have that triple captainship left over, definitely worth saving and not using in this week. But it is an absolutely fantastic fixture for him. As for Arsenal, Bukayo Saka and all their assets as well, another decent one going forward. Chelsea have got this really good run, so I think any investment into their attacking line, Enzo, Palmer, Jackson, is definitely going to be a worthwhile bet. Same goes with Newcastle as well. On paper their fixtures are quite hard, but the projected goal numbers here are still pretty decent, so investments into Isak are definitely worth like going for. He's arguably the best forward in the league right now. If you're looking at 2024 as a whole, he currently sits 3rd for goals, only behind Mohamed Salah and Erling Haaland. So that's the level he's performing at, not only just this season but this calendar year as well. Spurs have actually got some interesting fixtures around match day 19 and 20, so maybe could be worth, you know, taking a look at Son, Solanke, Kulusevski, people like that, with some decent projected goal numbers across the board there. In terms of other teams as well, I spoke about Crystal Palace. Obviously they are starting to climb that rank a little bit. Not a team that have historically kind of been towards the top end of this table, but yeah, definitely a team I would be kind of keeping kind of tabs on after match day 18 in terms of those attacking assets. And then Brentford, we're seeing quite a sharp decline. A blank for Vissa today, a blank for Mbeumo as well, so probably going to be 2 assets that I recommend we probably should be looking to shift on after this Brighton game on Boxing Day. So yeah, that was the projected goals then. Let's move on to the next section, and I want to talk about João Pedro and Erling Haaland, 2 players that I feel like a lot of people might potentially be looking to sell. As you can see here, over the past 5 game weeks, between them, 3 attacking returns. And obviously, let's start off with João Pedro first, right? If you watch him from an eye test perspective, he's basically playing at left wing back. It's really frustrating and disappointing. But I think the thing with him is, I would probably keep him for the Brentford game. And that's just me saying that. I think I'm going to give him 1 more week. Purely down to the fact that Brentford are abysmal at defending. They've kept 1 clean sheet so far this season. They're terrible on the road as well. They've only managed to pick up 1 point on the road this season. And João Pedro's minutes look very secure. Obviously, Brighton made a plethora of substitutions today around that 70th minute mark, and he wasn't one of the ones that did come off. And I think that shows that he is very highly regarded by the manager. Hertzler has also spoke very highly of this young man and said that he is one of the key parts of this Brighton team going forward in the future. However, his performance performances, his data, his on-pitch kind of eye test perspective as well has been really, really disappointing. But I think for me personally, I am going to give him that Brentford game just to see how he gets on. After that, though, I probably would be looking to sell João Pedro anyway, with some more difficult fixtures, obviously Aston Villa and then Arsenal at home. So probably at that point would be starting to look away from him. Erling Haaland, man, it's such an interesting one. Obviously, if you've known my stance kind of throughout this season, I didn't own Erling Haaland at the start of the year, brought him back in around match day 6, then resold him again around match day 12 because I could see the City fixtures were extremely difficult. And I always said this at the start of the year, if Haaland isn't going to be a captain or isn't delivering at least 2 attacking returns per game, he is not going to be value for money at that 15 million price tag. And that is now coming to fruition with him, of course, and City struggling to create opportunities. Again, below 1 XG in today's game against Aston Villa. As you can see, he's only had 1.3 XG over the past 5 game weeks as well. The man is not staying humble, to say the least, either. So he's not getting the opportunities. City as a side as well are not creating those opportunities for him. And when you're paying 15 million, you've got people like Alexander Isak and Jackson, who for me are providing much better value in that forward position and allow you to go and get a midfield free of Saka, Palmer and Salah. I do believe it probably is time to sell up on Erling Haaland. Now, the fixtures coming up are really, really good, and we'll see that with the 11FI data as well. We saw strong projected goal involvement numbers. Again, we'll be looking at individual player projected numbers as well from 11FI a little bit later in the video, and they do have Erling Haaland with some of the best numbers over the next 5 to 6 game weeks, and that is the thing. I think he still has that in his locker because he's not all of a sudden just become a terrible player. I think obviously the City system isn't quite functioning at the moment. It's not really working in his favour, and it is leading to him obviously having less opportunities, having less clear-cut opportunities to go and get himself goal involvements as well. So, yeah. And obviously when you sat here comparing him next to João Pedro, who costs 5.8 million, and Haaland, who costs 14.9 million at the time of recording, yeah, it's not looking good for either of these two players, but I feel like if I was to pick the bigger priority to probably shift on, probably would be Haaland. You're not going to captain him this week. 19, you're probably going to captain him, but the likes of Salah, Palmer and Salah all have decent captaincy options in those weeks as well. Alexander Isak is cooking, and Nicholas Jackson as well has been very, very steady for me this season. So I think both of these players are going to be on the chopping block come the next few weeks. Let's then look at some replacements in terms of those strikers, with both of those on the chopping block. If you are looking to shift both of these guys on either this week or in upcoming weeks. And I've outlined here five of my favourite players, there we go, for your potential teams to be going and looking at in terms of those replacements. So let's start off first with Mateta. I am filming this while the Arsenal game is of course taking place. Scored in the Carabao Cup in midweek, and I think the fixtures coming up for Crystal Palace are really, really good. Despite the 11FI data not being too keen on them, I think there's some really, really good games coming up for them. Bournemouth away, Southampton away the next 2 as well. His goal involvement is leaving quite a lot to be desired as well. Of course, 0.41 as well. Not the greatest. However, the Fantasy Football Hub predicted points algorithm is really, really fancying him with the second highest projected points, higher than Nicholas Jackson over the next 3 game weeks as well. It probably is that Southampton at home fixture that is definitely swinging it for him. But yeah, a player I am keeping a very, very keen eye on. Currently below 3% owned, and could be one of those differential forwards that does just pop off. Obviously though, I think his price point is going to be the sticky point for most people, with obviously Wood and Duran on this list a lot cheaper, and maybe some people as well a little bit stretched for money. But I think he's an option that is definitely worth considering with some good fixtures coming up for Crystal Palace. Alexander Isak is a man that just can't seem to stop scoring. 14 goal involvements, the best underlying data on this list per 90 as well. The best predicted points from the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm as well. And you might be looking at those fixtures going, Villa, United, Tottenham. I don't really back any of these teams to keep clean sheets, to be honest. Villa have only kept 2 so far this season. Spurs are pretty woeful at the back, as are Manchester United away. And and Newcastle seem to be in red hot form. Now I know they've only played Leicester and Ipswich within their last two, but they've looked so good going forward, and I feel like sometimes you need these results where they just give the attackers a lot of confidence and they're playing with a real kind of fluidity within the side. And I think one of the big factors of that is Anthony Gordon as well starting to come back into form. He looked stupendous again today. Jacob Murphy on the right, they've got Harvey Barnes that they can throw into the mix as well. They've got so many of their good attackers back that are linking up exceptionally well with Alexander Isak as well, and he's kind of being the little bit of the finishing gem towards these as well. A smashing hat-trick from him today, and definitely a player that I would be looking to buy over the next few weeks if you haven't already. Then moving on to Nicholas Jackson as well, obviously yet to play in game week 17, so please do make sure that he doesn't pick up that yellow card and is suspended for the Fulham game in game week 18. But again, the Chelsea fixtures before the FDR rating changes, if you didn't know, they were changed on the website 2 days ago, but it was just a long run of greens, and I think some of these greys probably should still be greens, to be honest. Again, really good goal involvement numbers for him, for a player that has been seeing very consistent minutes so far this season as well. Third highest for predicted points from Fantasy Football Hub, and I do feel like Chelsea are going to be one of the top teams this season, and probably one of the best teams to watch going forward. And with the fixtures, I've spoke about it in length for large parts this season, you could realistically hold your Chelsea assets if you bought them in right now all the way till the end of the season, because I still believe they'll be probably kicking on the door, maybe kind of challenging Liverpool for that title as well. So, you know, they are going to be a team that are going to be dominating a lot of games, scoring a lot of goals in a lot of games. We saw from the 11-5 data as well over the next few weeks, really good projected goal involvement numbers as well. So Jackson and Isak, two of my favourite assets if you are looking in the striker market as well. Chris Wood, obviously it's been a great season for him, 10 goal involvements, all of those being goals. Missed a big chance today in the game against Brentford. Arguably, I'd say the next two fixtures aren't the easiest from a striking perspective. Spurs and Everton as well, with Forest not I would say the most most flourishing attack is probably the best way to put it. I think the 11-5 data maybe showed that off a little bit as well. There is kind of, you know, Forest only usually score one or two. They don't absolutely go and batter teams as well. His expected goal involvement numbers aren't the greatest on this list. As you can see, very similar towards Mateta, and not really kind of at the same levels as Isak or Jackson for me. And I think the next two fixtures are probably going to be a little bit more difficult from him. And I think the predicted points as well also does highlight that. But I still think he could be a decent option. Maybe if you can't quite get to a Mateta, Isak and Jackson as well. Then finally, we've got to talk about John Duran. A goal in the early kickoff. Could have easily had a hat-trick today, to be honest, because John Duran looked absolutely stupendous. It's now 3 starts in a row in the Premier League for him. A man that's kind of built a reputation this season as just being a bit of I would say a Javier Hernandez of Aston Villa, really. If you remember back to his time at Manchester United, always just coming off the bench, scoring very important goals. Duran is now playing the games. That's 3 games over Ollie Watkins as well. 7 goal involvements during that time. Obviously, his expected goal involvement per 90 is going to look ridiculously good because he's not actually playing full 90s, like I said. He's only played 3 games from the start this season. The rest of them have all been off the bench as well. And I think that's also probably reflected in the predicted points from the Fantasy Football Hub model as well, is they're not quite sure to kind of assess who's still going to be playing for Aston Villa. So I think this one, if I was desperately kind of going to get rid of João Pedro and really fancied a bit of a risky pick, I think Duran could be the man. Like, there's a clear reason they've obviously dropped Watkins. He's been missing a lot of big chances this season. Duran at 5.8 could be a little bit of a gem. He genuinely could. But it is, of course, the fact that they do have, arguably, one of the best strikers last season in the Premier League was Ollie Watkins. They've got him just ready to go at any point, and that is obviously the concern if you were to bring in Duran. But he is at that lower price point. There are some good fixtures, especially from an attacking standpoint. I think the Newcastle away one's probably a bit difficult, but Brighton and Leicester, definitely, you could see Aston Villa scoring in both of those games as well. However, I would caveat this and say, though, that there could be some rotation even further because Villa still have the Champions League up in the new year as well, so do just be wary of that one. But my God, John Duran is looking really good. He's really taken his kind of opportunity with the start so far this season. So maybe he is going to be the lead in number 9. If there are any Villa fans in the chat, let me know down in the comments below whether or not you think he is potentially going to be the Villa number 9. But I think he could be worth a punt. Of course, though, my 2 favourite assets are going to be Isak and Jackson if you are looking for João Pedro or Erling Haaland replacements for me. Both of these guys feel like they could absolutely explode into 2025 as well. So both players for me, really good pickups. Let's move on then. Let's take a look at the final two players before moving on to the projected goal involvement data from 11FI and the predicted points data from Fantasy Football Hub. It is going to be Crystal Palace. Like I said, they're about to go on this really good fixture run past even these three fixtures you can see on screen right now. And the two players that I'm really looking at is going to be Daniel Munoz and Sarr. Like I said at the start of the video, I am filming this while the Arsenal game is taking place. So if any of these players do get injured or whatever, please do ignore me. Obviously, Munoz isn't featuring in game week 17, picked up his fifth yellow card of the season. However, prior to that, he's starting to get into some really good positions and looks absolutely incredible. If you look at his heat map as well, it's really good. Genuinely, one of the best you're going to see from a defender as well. His underlying data, I believe it's 0.18 goal involvement per 90 for a defender at 4.7 million, playing for a pretty half-decent Palace defence that we saw on the 11FI data as well, was starting to move forward in terms of those predicted clean sheets as well. So I think this could be a real worthwhile investment. Maybe if you didn't get rid of Aït-Nouri this week, like I didn't, Munoz is going to be the player that I am going to be looking to bring in as my Aït-Nouri replacement. Then moving on to Sarr, obviously a fantastic performance for him in game week 16. Again, the data is looking really good, and at 5.7 million, he could be another one that enters this kind of bracket of cheap midfielders that are really exploding onto the scene. I know a lot of people might be potentially looking to shift off Brian and Mbeumo, Jared Bowen as well after the Boxing Day fixtures also turn as well, with West Ham's fixture taking a big swing. And obviously, kind of, I would say around that price point, there aren't really any kind of standout players other than Bowen and Mbeumo. So you're probably either going to go up or you're going to come down to the Sarrs, the Ahmeds, the Enzos, the Morgan Rogers of the world. So I think Sarr could potentially be one of those players that does become very popular, especially if he puts in a really good performance in game week 17 against Arsenal. And finally, wrapping up today's video, it is going to be the projected goal involvement numbers from 11FI as well. I've just quickly checked my phone and seen that Sarr scored, so that last section looks even better now. So yeah, definitely going to be a player that a lot of people are going to be looking at. But yeah, let's take a look at projected goal involvement numbers then over the next few weeks. As we can see, Cole Palmer looking pretty decent over this period, so definitely going to be one of those players, like I spoke about with Chelsea as well, looking really good from a fixture standpoint as well. This originally was going to be the reason that I was looking at Erling Haaland as well, of course, was going to be around these fixtures here, to be honest, because they are just so good. That's the thing. They are really good fixtures going forward for Erling Haaland, and of course Manchester City as well, is the fact that they're just so good going forward. But obviously he's not delivering. City are struggling to create opportunities, so I do think that I'm going to obviously not bring him in, but that was the original thought process behind it. As we can see, Salah and Saka in match day 18 as well. Really good numbers for them too. It probably is going to be between Palmer, Salah and Saka for captaincy. I think with the stronger projected goal numbers for Liverpool in that game week, I'm probably going to be looking at him. Alexander Isak has got really good numbers across the board as well, so I think any sort of investment into him. Havertz is on here, but I've just seen that Jesus has scored a brace, obviously scored a few goals in midweek in the Carabao as well. You'd imagine his numbers are probably going to be similar from a projected goal involvement standpoint as well. Arsenal, we saw, had decent projected goal involvement numbers going forward as well. Same goes with Watkins just below that as well, that you could argue just swap Duran in there because they are playing very similar kind of roles and positions and minutes and stuff like that. So maybe Jesus and Duran potentially could be another few players as well to be considering. We spoke about Jackson as well. Again, looks a real solid bet for consistent kind of goal involvement numbers across that period as well. Let's move on then to the, not 11FI. This is the Fantasy Football Hub predicted points over the next 5 game weeks. Palmer top, Salah second, Haaland in third. So they're still back in Haaland to do quite well over this period, but I do probably expect a little bit of a drop for the big man once all the games kind of data is updated. Saka and Isak following that as well, so again, really bullish on Isak in terms of him as a pick as well. Like I said, he is currently the 3rd highest scoring Premier League player in 2024, behind Salah and behind Erling Haaland as well. Chris Wood we spoke about. Again, the Fantasy Football Hub model has been loving him since the start of the season, been very bullish, and it's really paid off as well. Jackson and Mateta also feature on this list. João Pedro still just clinging on there down the bottom towards the end as well, and Sarr as well making it on there. So I'm just putting out there, I think Sarr could be one of those players that a lot of people do potentially jump on over the next few weeks as a Brian and Mbeumo replacement. That of course was today's transfer targets video. Let me know if there are any players players we covered in today's video that are potentially taking your eye. And of course, like I said at the start of the video, we are trying to hit 11,000 subscribers. So if you do want to help me hit that goal, make sure you're liking, subscribing, and yeah, get your comments in as well. Thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and have a very Merry Christmas.